And now, animating Xamarin.Forms with Matthew.
All right, thank you very much, Espen. And what a great conference, huh? All mobile. This is my first time here, first time in Norway, and pure mobile conference. This is wonderful. And so well run. I can't believe it's just the second year that this is being run. Everything's like clockwork. So thank you very much for having me. And thank you all for coming. This is my first time doing this talk, and it's going to be an interesting talk because Xamarin.Forms has a reputation, and it's not deserved, of producing, how should I say, generic-looking user interfaces. They don't look good. And animation's exciting. Things are moving around, and you're getting down to the low-level APIs. And iOS, you're going to core graphics or core animation. You might even be going down to Metal to do your animations. So it's going to be interesting how we can take something that has a reputation of being boring and something that has a reputation of being fun and mashing them together. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, who am I? My name is Matt. I hail from the US in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is known for a couple of things. My favorite, though, is beer and cheese. So I have a lot of fun there. And I happen to work for Microsoft. I work for Microsoft as a senior cloud developer advocate, specializing in mobile. What that means is I'm producing content for developers to help everybody use the cloud in an easy way, whether it's code samples, libraries, videos, coming out to conferences to talk. My Twitter, CodeMailMatt, is open, direct messages, so if anybody wants to talk about Azure or has any trouble with Azure, let me know, and I can go back to engineering and talk as well. So with that, we're going to talk about animation. So why would one animate an app? Well, there's a couple reasons why. First off, we might want to highlight things that are happening within an app. This can be from onboarding a user when they first start the app, to let them know how to use the app to get their experience better, get them up and running quicker. It could be to highlight something important when it comes back. You can make a call to a web service, and it takes a little while to come back, and they're using the app, and all of a sudden something happens. Let them know it's finished. To distract the user, we have another web service call that's going out. Takes a while, the app's unusable during that time. So we're going to have an animation run to distract them, make the user think that, well, this isn't taking so long because I have this cool animation running. I started doing mobile development maybe 7 years ago, and the running joke at the time was half of mobile development was creating animations to make the app, to hide how long the app was taking. And of course, the other half is just copy-paste from Git or Stack Overflow. And then guiding. We want to lead the user's brain around the app, showing how different UI elements interact with each other. There's been studies that show even pushing and popping onto a navigation stack takes time for the users to cognitively understand what's happening. So if we can have an animation come up and show how a parent and child interact, that helps the users use our app just a little bit better, helps them understand where things are coming from. And then most importantly, we want to delight our users. If they're happy, they get that warm feeling inside, they're going to come back to our app more and more. Even if it's not a huge animation, just something little that makes their day just a little bit brighter, they're going to come back, they're going to love our app, and that's why we developed it in the first place. So, how many of you are all Xamarin people, have developed with Xamarin before? Awesome. Xamarin.Forms developers? All right, very good. So this next part can go pretty fast. It's going to be the 101 of what is Xamarin. So we have a shared app logic layer. Library written in C# or F# if you're doing the functional thing. It's going to be shared code. App logic, database access, REST calls. On top of that, we're going to have our iOS, Android, UWP apps. Also, it's expanding. You can have Mac apps now. We can have Tizen's running as well. Those are also C# APIs, and they're the native APIs. They're the same thing you would get if you're developing in Java or Swift or Kotlin. It is the real thing. they emit a 100% Android, iOS, or UWP app. So we have the user interface, and then the app logic. But we still are using storyboards or XML files for Android or XAML files for UWP. So we're writing the user interface 3 different times. We're getting about 70% code reuse because we have that shared app logic layer, but it's still, 70% we can do better. And that's where XamarinForms comes in. They've put a shared UI layer in between the platform project and that shared app logic layer. So what that shared UI layer does, it abstracts the common elements between all 3 platforms. So every platform is going to have an image. So what we did is we put an image into that shared UI layer, and then we can program against that API. And then it emits a 100% UI image or an Android widget image or a UWP image. And there's several. There's over 40 different controls: button, image, list views. The cool thing is that there is also a basic animation framework as well, included with XamarinForms. So if you think about it, each platform is completely different in how you do animations. Like you have core animation, but yet we can abstract it enough where we have an animation framework that we can program against in the shared project layer. So that brings us to the keys to doing animation with XamarinForms. There's 3 of them I want to talk about. First off is how to animate. And here is the different frameworks we can use. Next up is where to animate. And here I'm talking about physically where are we going to put the code in order to do the animation. And then finally, when to animate. When in the app's lifecycle or when the user is interacting with the app, when do we want to actually have the animations pop up? So first up, how? Of course, I just talked about the built-in XamarinForms framework. Of course, we want to use that. It's there for us already. Second thing I'm going to talk about is SkiaSharp, which is a drawing framework. And then finally, Airbnb created this library called Lottie that we can use. And Lottie is actually really slick and super easy to use, and we'll get to that at the end. Where do we physically put the code? Well, XamarinForms, we're going to put it in that gray shared layer. We're going to write it once, and we're going to emit it natively on all 3 platforms. Then when? Well, one of the times is in the navigation and context. You see here, this is the Lyft app, which is kind of like an Uber. And when the hamburger menu slides out, we can see that the map in the back, in addition to the modal coming through, gets smaller. It's indicating, hey, I'm not in use. And then when the menu slides back in or slides back out, the map gets larger, saying, I'm in use now. So it's just that little context of saying when it can be used and when it can't be used. Visual feedback, to let the user know that their actions were successful or not. Here's 1Password. 1Password requires you to enter a password or thumbprint to authenticate before you get access to all your passwords. So here, when it comes back out, entering a thumbprint, then it's like a safe unlocking. You know your actions were successful. You're in. This next one is system status, letting you know while it's doing something in the background. This is Shazam. It's listening to some music, sending it up to the server to identify whatever song that you happen to want to identify. It's even listening and going along to the beat. So at this point, you can't do anything. You don't know what's going on, but it's still giving you some animation, and it's giving you the animation even to the beat too. So it's giving you the feedback saying, hey, I'm doing something. You don't have to worry about me. So how are we going to put all these together? Navigation and context, we're going to do that with the built-in framework. Visual feedback, I'm going to put that together with SkiaSharp. And then the system status, I'm going to do that with Lottie. So what I'm going to do first is show you what I have running. And we'll go over here. All right. So what I have is just a simple, it's meant to be a rideshare application, similar to Uber, where you're able to just hit this button and say, all right, I want to be picked up at this location, dropped at this location, and then set the pickup, and it disappears, says, I'm waiting, 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 and comes back. Real simple. Same thing over on the iOS side. And then on iOS, you notice I put this little guy's fixing his car. That's why you want to be picked up. These are the things that entertain me when I'm doing the demos. I put little stupid pictures on there. Again, pickup destination, then set pickup, and that's it. Pretty boring. You really don't know. You hit this button, it disappears, and that other thing comes up. It's not really fitting in. So we're going to animate things to make it all flow better. So then, let's talk about navigation and context. So an idea here, again, is object interaction. If you look, this is from the Google Calendar app, a full-on list view of the calendars. If you selected any single one and it just pushed it onto a navigation stack, you might be wondering, which one did I select? Did I hit the wrong one? But you can see here when we hit the green VS Live Chicago, it kind of pops out at you. So you don't have to, you know exactly which one you hit because it's coming at you and is animated, blowing up. Gmail app. When you long press on something and actually go into a selection state, it's actually flipping the icons around so you know which ones you're selecting. So you can delete a bunch at once. So just that little animation lets you know what's going on with the app. So the built-in part of Xamarin.Forms has 4 APIs that you can use. There's a translation, which takes a view and can move it up, left, right, both diagonally at the same time. We have scale, which we can take and make it bigger. Rotate, which goes around the Z-axis coming out of the screen. And you also have fade, which can take a view and just decrease the alpha channel on it. There's some additional attributes as well. All those work on every single view subclass in Forms, meaning they work on every single control that you have. There are extension methods in .NET is how they're implemented, and there's also easing functions provided, meaning that we can bounce something in or we can do a sign in and sign out where it speeds up, it slows down, and speeds up again. Asynchronous, we can use async await so we don't have to block the UI thread. And we can compose or compound several. And what I mean by that is we can run like a fade and a scale and a rotate all at the same time, and we can run them on different views at the same time as well. So let's change our UI to start using these. All right, so what I have is just real simple. I have a grid with the relative layout, the image, the buttons, and the activity indicator. The thing that is picking where you enter your destination and where you want to be picked is just a content view with the grid in there and a label and an entry form. So it's just a compound control. To actually do the translation, I'm going to have three functions that get called all the time. Initial position, where I'm just putting it on the screen. Call right click, that's going to be the one where the little person was fixing their car, and it's going to initially show everything. And then height controls, where we hit that confirm button and they disappear. So we're going to be calling an iteration of these three things all the time. So the no animation portions, I'm just going to comment out and then recomment in. This. So in the initial position, what I'm doing now is just taking the views and positioning them off the screen so I can slide them in. So there's really nothing animation related there. But in the call right click, what I'm doing is some math here to make sure they come into where they should be, and then doing a task win all so I can run these all together. I'm fading one in, translating them. So fading one in while I translate the other ones. Translating is moving them over. So then the destination info, I fade that in then, and then move it up. You can confirm ride then. I'm finally translating that, moving it into position, finally fading that in. And then right at the end, I'm taking that little button where the guy was fixing his car and making it invisible. So let's see it run then with the new animations. So it's 24 to about 20 lines of code, and it's mainly just because you're typing everything out. And now it looks like that. You notice the destination bounced in, and that's because I did this easing function where I said easing bounce out. You could use several different easing functions. So if I went sign in, sign out, it would no longer bounce, it would just come in normal. Another thing that we can do is you see it moved in slower. You can provide a time for how long you want the animation to run as well. All right. So, and we'll run the, when I hit this though, you'll notice the, it just kind of disappears. It doesn't go along with it. So what I want to do is add, and it runs the animation here, calling, and it just kind of pops right back in. So what I want to do is take this call ride that is visible. I'm going to add a little scaling to it. So scale 2. I'm going to make it scale to 0. Tell it how long I want it to run. And an easing function, I always find the sign in, sign out to be the most useful one. And I'm going to call the exact opposite when I show everything again. So when I'm showing, I'm just reversing whatever the position of everything. Back up and running, and zoom in on it again. And it kind of just looks a little bit better. It's not so abrupt when it comes out, and then when it comes back in. So it's pretty easy to just do it with the built-in framework, and it's going to work the same way on Android. So the whole Xamarin.Forms promise of writing it once, working it the same way on either platform, which is great. But we can do more. What we looked at, though, is animations for navigation, context, and functional, and then how to implement that with Xamarin.Forms, the built-in APIs. So next up is visual feedback. And here is what I'm talking about is letting the user know when they actually touch something on the screen. Give them the feeling that, hey, I'm actually doing something. An example would be like here, where they touch something and you get a little shadow running across the control. Or this from the Twitter app, when they actually hit the like button, the heart explodes with a like. We can do that with a framework called Skia. Skia is made by Google, and it's the default drawing framework in Android, Chrome, and Firefox. Some 2D drawing framework. It is open sourced, so we can actually get at it and see how it's all done. Xamarin has gone in and made it cross-platform, meaning that we can use it in traditional iOS or Droid work or forms as well. And it's just NuGetable. So it's just a library you have to download. There's nothing special you have to do in order to use it. What can it do? Well, it can just draw lines. You can draw arcs with it, of course. You can start moving them all together. So you can draw lines with arcs. You can make a rectangle. You also have a shortcut that says draw rectangle. You can put fills into those rectangles. Everything you can imagine a drawing framework does. You can also just draw bitmaps. Say, hey, I want to draw this bitmap instead. You can draw text with fonts. So you can just say mobile era, and you don't have to worry about drawing that whole path out. for it. So it's a full feature drawing framework. It really is equivalent to core graphics over on iOS, but it's cross-platform, so we don't have to do everything on 3 different ones. So the basics of how you use it is that you have a canvas. Think of a canvas really as an artist's easel. We also have a paint object. That paint object really controls the line width, the colors, and whether the object should be filled or not. And then finally, you have a very, very organized paintbrush. That paintbrush holds a map of every direction that it needs to go. And what happens is the canvas yells paint. Canvas yells paint me, which causes that paintbrush to use whatever on the paint object to perform its map directions. And that's really, in a nutshell, all that happens. But then how do you actually animate that? Well, you just have the canvas start yelling erase, paint, erase, paint. Then every time the paint is yelled, the paintbrush changes its directions just a little bit. So every time it's erased, the paint directions change, and you get the illusion of animation going on, because the directions are changed just that little bit. So let's show how we can build one up really quick. So what I want to do is show some visual feedback of letting the user know that they typed something or hit that little button on the screen that actually shows the destination and pickup button. Oh. All right. So what I did is I downloaded the NuGet packages and I created this new ride flag button, inherited from content view. And I have my SK canvas. This is my artist easel. In the constructor, I'm just newing it up. And then I have this paint surface event handler. So this is what's it called every time the canvas yells paint. I have a tap gesture recognizer in there just so I can tap it and something gets handled. Setting the content of the overall content view of this control to be the canvas, to be the easel. And then finally, it's yelling paint right at the end, this invalidate surface. So it yells paint, this handler gets invoked, and then coming in with it, there's info. Info just gives us some information about what it looks like on the screen at the current time, the current canvas that we're dealing with. And then what I'm doing is I'm loading up this image of the person fixing the car right away, just so I can show what the code is to draw it. Erasing everything that happens to be on the screen. Loading up what color I want. So I'm going to get the button to be a fuchsia, and I'm going to fill it in, just called draw a circle. So I can do a shortcut for the path and just say draw a circle, center 50 radius units. Now these aren't Xamarin.Forms units, these are pixels, just FYI. And then draw bitmap. And then, if we were going to do the animation loop, which happens after a tap gesture, what happens is that while running the animation, we increase another counter, we increase it up 50 units, and then back down 50 units, and we run it 30 times a second. And we call invalidate surface. The canvas yells paint me 30 times a second. And then while it's yelling paint me, it comes in here, and it erases itself every time, 30 times a second, and does the same thing, draws a circle, draws the bitmap, but now it runs this thing. And we reuse the paint color, make it white with a half of an alpha, and we're drawing another circle and the current radius. So we're increasing the circle up and then shrinking it back down. So we're just giving the illusion that they hit it and it's coming up and coming down. So in order to integrate that, what I'm going to do first is comment out the old button and then put this in. All right, so it's just the XAML namespace with the control name and then where I want it positioned on the screen. And then comment out my old code. I have new code I want to comment in. All right. So again, this code does the same thing as before. There's nothing that actually changes in here except that we're using a new button for the tapped handler. So let's actually run it on iPhone then. First off, we notice we have a perfectly circled button here instead of that rounded rectangle from before. Again, when I tap on it, you'll see that it kind of pops in, pops out. I didn't do anything different to actually get that. On the Xamarin.Forms side, that was all in Skia. It doesn't look that great with the bitmap on there, so I just wanted to show how to draw the bitmap. So what I'm going to do is comment that out, run this on Android, and see it run again, just so we can see that the SkiaSharp, running it once, runs on both platforms. All right, we have it. The bitmap is gone, but we hit it, just pops in, pops out. But that big spinner is still kind of ugly, and we can do better than that as well. All right. So what we looked at is when in the life cycle of an app we want to do direct manipulation and visual feedback animations. And we can look at it with SkiaSharp. But next, system status. And these are the fun ones. These are the ones that you can actually take up the entire screen because your app is doing something important that it can't continue on. So one right here, this is from Google's Material Motion, is like it's avoiding double bookings, adding sessions for the first week. So it's adding stuff to your calendar. So it's showing like this bike going back and forth, ready to take off, and the spinner's up there going. So it's distracting you while it's doing this heavy lifting in the background. And so you're like ready to go, but you don't mind that it's taking so long. You want that bike just to take off the screen. So the app is processing, and you're seeing this animation going along. The next, you have an internal status. Like, so an error actually happened in the app, and T-Rex here can't reach his ice cream cone. It fell down. You actually almost want the app to fail so you can see these animations happen, right? You have just enough there to make, yeah, that's cool. I don't mind that the app blew up on me, as long as the exceptions happen and it doesn't, or was caught and doesn't blow off. So I mean, so you have these big full screen animations, and they distract the user of what actually happened in the background, just so it's just enough to provide a little delight. And we can do that. We can put those into a cross-platform app with a framework called Lottie. So Lottie was developed by Airbnb to take After Effects animation and bring them into apps. iOS, Android, React Native, and Xamarin are all available with it. They did this in a way such that you can just bring them in with JSON. So the hardest part about this is finding a graphic designer who can create After Effects animations. So you find that person, you have them create the After Effects. They use a plugin called Body Movin'. And what Body Movin' does is it exports the animation as JSON. So now we just have a text file. We can just import that text file, and then it's as simple as using it as an image at this point, which is really cool. All right, so let's see this in action. What I want to do is replace that ugly spinner with something more interesting. All right, so what I already have in the app is, on each platform, so you do have to add the JSON into each platform. I have this thing called bikeloader.json. Same thing over any Android side. And so Lottie is a NuGet. A fellow by the name of Martin van Dijk from the Netherlands created the binding for us to bring it in. And so what he do is that this is all Xamarin stuff. Is visible, relative layout, and so on. This right here is the only Lottie stuff, saying loop the animation, play it as soon as it's shown, and the animation name. That's all there is to it. So what I'm going to do then is comment out showing and hiding my spinner and make sure Lottie is there. And I'll run this on the droid first. Comes in. We say OK. We set our pickup. And now we have this little moped while it goes out and tries to find our ride for us. So we're using that animation instead of the spinner to do it. And we can do it over here on iOS too, because it's actually pretty neat to see it run on both platforms. And again, the same animation running. So it's the same JSON file. You do have to add it to the platform-specific project, but it's there running. So if you do happen to not have a graphic designer, like I do not have, there is a community site out there called Lottie Files. So what people have done is they've gone out there and created their own Lottie JSON. You can go out there, try to find an animation you like, and then download it and add it to your app. So there is one called this favorite star. So what I would like to do is add that to our animations here to, like, hey, we actually found you a ride, and show that. And so I've already downloaded it, I believe. Yep, I have it on the desktop. Yep, here we go. So what I'm going to do is add it into each and into the assets. And then I'm going to bring this in. All right. So what I'm doing here is that showing the initial animation while using this artificial delay, and then coming in and fading it out to 0 and scaling it down. So we're going to have down, changing the animation to that starburst, fading it back to 1 while I bring the scale back to 1, and then another artificial delay so we can show it, and then just swapping the animation back. So let's see it run this time. So all these scale to, fade to, they're the same Xamarin.Forms traditional built-in animations running on this Lottie view. So it's just showing off that we can run it, run all their extension methods, and we can run them anywhere. So we have it, set pickup, we see our little moped going out, and then it successfully got us a ride. And then we're back to normal. And just because we're cross-platform, let's show it on a droid. Run, run, run. And, all right. Android's always my most fun device. Deploying. And here we go. Set pickup down, little moped while we wait for the ride, and then the starburst when we found it. So Lottie's really cool that you can do a lot of cool things really just by showing an image. And the hardest part's finding that graphic designer who can do it for you. All right. So what we looked at there is that we want to do animations in the system status. Let the user know that the app is doing something, that it just hasn't quit on them and locked up. And this is where we can do the expanded animations. We can do something really cool and take over the whole screen. And Lottie is a great way to do that because you can use the powers of a graphic designer and easily get it in to the app. So overall, animation use cases, navigation and context, show the user how different elements on a screen interact with each other so they don't have to think about it. So it's more intuitive to them. Visual feedback. On the screen, how certain, when they actually touch it, prove that they did touch it. They give them some feedback that something actually happened. And then, of course, what we just talked about, system status. The app didn't lock up, it's going out and doing something. And then in Xamarin.Forms, we looked at the built-in animation API. It's available on every single control you put on the screen, even the ones that aren't built in because they're all built off the content view. So like the Lottie and the SkiaSharp one that we put in there, they still have the Xamarin.Forms animations on them. SkiaSharp 2D drawing framework, you can just draw on it, but if you call paint, erase, a bunch of times over and over, you can do animations with it, and it's fluid and responsive, so I haven't seen it lock up yet. And then Lottie. Lottie, again, being the After Effects viewer. And so with all those three together, you do get your delighted users who are really happy using the app, and they'll love you for it forever. So with that said, all the code and slides are out there at akams/animations. And my name is Matt Soucoup again. My DMs are open at CodeMill or if you ever have any questions, feel free to email me too. So with that said, thank you very much, and any questions, let me know.